Um, Kazuto, thank you so much for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a professor of the Science and Technology Policy and International Relations at the University of Tokyo. I am I have been working on space for last 20 years. I did my PhD at the University of Sussex in England, and my PhD thesis was the European space collaboration. I'm a political scientist working on the international affairs, so uh, I am more or less focused on the policy side and the governance side of the space. And yeah, it's the all the project to the moon is the interesting subject for political science, and how decisions are made, who is involved, and what sort of issues are lying there, who is against, what are the reasons for the controversies, what other countries do, why countries sign on the Artemis Accord. Those kind of things are my research interests. So that's I think what I'm going to talk about today is going to be focusing on that aspects.
And how did you get into this? I mean, have you always been interested in space, or was there
That's
something that got you into this?
that's a good question. I have very limited interest in space. Of course, the space interests me all time, but the reason why I come into the space policy side was that I was doing the research on the international relations, particularly the relationship between the science and technology and the international security. And the reason why I was interested in the European space policy in my PhD, before that, I didn't do any space study, but I chose space collaboration in Europe was very interesting because it represents the sort of a disjuncture of the market integration by the European Union, but at the same time, there are national security interests. So the space bridges on both sides. And the European space collaboration is done basically around the European Space Agency, ESA. And ESA is different entity from EU. So I was interested in why there is no EU process in space. Today, we do have the EU space process and EU Space Agency, but EU Space Policy Agency. But in 1990s, until 1990s and early 2000s, there was no such EU involvement in space. So I was doing the history of, I did the study on the history of European collaboration, why states wanted to have space outside EU, and how the states want to maintain their security interest, the national decisions, national autonomy in space, while they are collaborating for building, launcher like Ariane or a space station, these kind of things. So, that was the fascination as a political scientist. And then I started to study about the space.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. I mean, I remember ESA and UK and others making the point during Brexit that ESA was completely different than the EU.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So interestingly, because Britain is exited from EU, Britain is no longer allowed to access to Galileo, the navigation PNT program. But meanwhile, the UK is still the member of ESA, so they can be part of the European space activities, but they are excluded from some space activities, such as Galileo. Although Copernicus, which is another EU project, but Britain has a special status in the Copernicus. So Copernicus is still, EU is UK is still part of the partner of the Copernicus.
That's interesting. So Galileo is actually an EU project, not an ESA project.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a pretty significant project to not be a part of.
Yes, and that's why the UK wanted to have its own navigation program. And one of the reasons why UK has bought, invested in the OneWeb was to establish some sort of a foothold in the satellite constellation program. And second generation of OneWeb will have some sort of a positioning and navigation capabilities. That's what I heard.
It's always kind of a, I was wondering how OneWeb was going to compete against Starlink, but I'm not sure Starlink has any plans to offer PNT.
No, I don't think Starlink has any idea of providing a PNT services. I think it's OneWeb largely because UK is the largest shareholder. So that's why the UK is trying to push the OneWeb to have the PNT capabilities.
It seems like a collaboration around something as immediate, definite, finite, and well-defined as a climate is so challenging that whenever you go to start talking about collaboration around things in space, it seems like it'd be even harder to make that collaboration come up in some type of broad perspective. I was wondering what you saw as being the unique challenges with space collaboration.
Yeah, well, in Europe, the climate has a special status in the policy process. Europe is a leading partner in the climate change, and Britain is going to host the COP26 in Glasgow in a few weeks' time, and the EU is using this as a big leverage to stimulate the space program, and that's one way of building up a space capability. And I think it is a very interesting moment that the EU become more and more weighted on the on environmental issues and the using the space for the environmental monitoring capabilities.
And you did mention Artemis and the Artemis Accords, and we've had several countries sign it, but several that you would kind of expect to sign it, not sign it. I was wondering what your sense of the international perception of the Artemis Accords is.
Well, those countries, for example, Germany, France, these countries are put it on hold. I think they don't want to rush into the being a part of the Artemis, but they have already been. ESA has been the partner of NASA for building up the Gateway, the lunar cislunar space station, and so I think they think that it is enough at this moment to be a part of the Artemis program, but the Artemis Accord seem to be a little. I think there are some questionable points in terms of the legal issue of of space. For example, setting up the safety zone, which may be interpreted as the appropriation of the part of the lunar surface, which may be in infringement with the Outer Space Treaty. So, these kind of things needs to be clarified, and I think the NASA and the authors of the Artemis Accord has been very careful in terms of the writing, but still there are some room to doubt. So I think those the big European players are putting on hold and take it easy, see what's going to happen, and then I think that's how they going to react. So I'm not so skeptical about their intent, or I'm not skeptical about the future of the Artemis Accord. It's going to be basis of the governance of the lunar surface and the exploration of moon. So I hope it's going to be making some sort of a reasonable arrangement with the other big guys.
Yeah, we've been kind of dancing around that whole ownership and the ability to actually control things outside of our atmosphere. I mean, the space treaty, prohibits actually a country claiming the territory, but we've sort of been saying, well, it's like the international waters. You may not own the waters, but if you catch the fish and put it on top of your boat, then you own the fish, and that's probably questionable too. And then now we got the safety zones, which is kind of well, I may not own the waters, but you better stay so many feet away from my boat. But on the other hand, though, ownership and property and this idea of owning the land has been so instrumental and fundamental to the development of things on Earth. It's really difficult for us to have. I mean, it's really difficult for me to understand, and I'd like to get your insights into this, how we would actually be able to develop a space without sort of having a similar type of system, and but yet we don't really have a mechanism for creating one.
Yes, I think that's the heart of the question of space governance, because space belongs to no one, and space, on the Earth there are states which are territorially controlled. So if you are in the sovereign territory of United States, for example, the US law is applied. You can use the US dollar, and all the the laws and the regulations and the power, the police and the courts and all this power will be exercised within the territory. But the outer space, it belongs to no one, and there is no territorial control. So no one can say, hey, you are not supposed to take the mineral from this place or that place. And, it may be, for example, this is a hypothetical, but if you try to dig the surface of the moon, and suddenly the other country like China came in and kick you out, and then start digging the same place, no one can say that you are wrong, because there's no rule. So that's the problem, and I think it will be the Artemis Accord is the starting point to make the discussion of how the rules on the moon should be settled, and I think the more currently, I think there are 10 countries signing the Artemis Accord, and the more countries signing, the better the Artemis Accord accepted by the international community. But nevertheless, I think at the end of the day, it is the matter between the United States, China, and possibly Russia, India, or Japan, and Europe. Those countries which are capable of exploring the space and extracting some of the minerals or water from moon. So these are the major issue that needs to be done at the space governance. But given the rivalry between the United States and China, it is still difficult to have the dialogue with between United States and China.
And you mentioned those spacefaring countries
Hmm.
today, and obviously conflict is a likely outcome, to some degree. Disputes are disagreements, and obviously there are motivated parties to resolve those conflicts. But then perhaps you have a whole other set of stakeholders who aren't spacefaring yet,
Hmm.
but want to ensure that their position is not completely compromised by
Hmm.
current events. Um, how do you see the importance of trying to protect those stakeholders and their involvement in the process? I mean, how does that work? It seems like they're really not motivated to see a solution to having an agreement at this point.
Yeah, but if you look at the countries with who signed the Artemis Accord, there are countries which may not have the strong ambition of exploring moon. For example, Australia, Canada, etc. So I think those stakeholders can also be a part of the rulemaking process. They can have a say, but at the same time, I think their voices are smaller or weaker than those countries with an ambition. So I think the forum should be open, and the Artemis Accord or any type of the agreement on the governance of the moon needs to be discussed in a sort of an open forum and make sure that everyone is not left out. I think the worst case scenario is that if everything is done by the smaller number of countries and making them exclusive, creating an exclusive club for exploring moon. So I think current Artemis Accord is open to anybody, and NASA is trying to get everyone on board. So far, I think the South Korea has joined. UAE has joined. Those countries are they are addition to the Artemis Accord. So I think this process should be going on and should be kept going, and that would make it much stronger and resilient rules.
And I'm have been interviewing a large cross section of people that I can. A lot of these
Mm-hmm.
people are just trying to get their coffee at Starbucks or trying to buy a shirt at the mall. And so I go up to them. Did you know that
Mm-hmm.
NASA is planning to send astronauts to the moon in 2024? And I would say about 80% of those people who are not actually in the space community would say they had no idea that NASA was planning to send astronauts to the moon in 2024.
Yeah.
I was curious, based upon your experience of working with inside of the space policy community and your interactions just in your daily life, how widespread do you think that knowledge is that this is one of the aims of NASA?
Right. Um, I think the time has changed from the Apollo programs. I mean, the Apollo programs, it was the first of mankind or humankind, and it was the historical moment. It's the global, it was broadcasted simultaneously all over the world, and I think it was considered to be an achievement of the humankind. But today, going to space seems to be a sort of a natural. The Jeff Bezos was there. Richard Branson was there. The Inspiration 4 was there. So it seems that space becomes a sort of a normal life, and nothing particular to be excited upon. I think the value of space or the human space in general becomes as the sort of a commodity in a daily life. So I'm not surprised that people are not paying attention, because it's like taking a bus or going to a shopping mall. Like people are going to moon, so what? And I think um, it's a natural consequence of the progress of the space technology and the the space activities. And at the end of the day, I'm not so disappointed by that, because some people still being excited, and some people are not, and many people are not. And I think I agree that 80%. I think in Japan it's more than 80%. People don't know about the Artemis, program, or United States is planning to send the American astronauts, the female American astronauts, to moon by 2024. So that's natural. It's like one of those international news that nothing to do with the people's life. I think the life goes on, and I think still the value of the going to space remains, and exploring moon, and particularly finding water in the moon makes a lot of sense. And I think that would be a game changer. And if people start to settle on the moon, and possibly the permanent human presence on the moon would make a different perspective, or would give the different perspective to the large number of population.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the day whenever you can look up with the unaided eye and see human activity on the moon from the Earth. I think that will transform a lot of people's views.
Yeah, and also I think that transformation will become as a norm. And if people start to settle on the moon, and people look at the moon, with telescope, and see, there are some little human working on the moon, but at the same time, people start to be fascinated in a short while, but in the long run, people find it, oh, I went to the moon. Oh, you haven't? That sort of a conversation will be the sort of a normal life. I think, going to the moon is going to be like going to Hawaii or something. So if that's the case, that's again another progress of the humankind. I think, things are changing, and people perspective, perceptions change all the time. And then, once it was a surprise, then it becomes a normal, and then you do something more to make people surprised, and then it becomes normal, and again. So that's called progress.
Yeah, indeed. It just becomes part of the background, part of the foundation. So, about 500 years ago was the beginning of, Christopher Columbus coming to North America and the migration of the Europeans to the Americas. And then we've had all this development here since. And so that's kind of like the motivation for choosing that time range. But if you were to look forward 500 years, how far do you think humanity actually gets in terms of, kind of space settlement, space travel, and international cooperation?
I think there is I don't think there'll be a sort of a human evolution in terms of the life expectancy. So wherever you can go, it's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of the Earth. So moon is the obvious target, but Mars possible, but nothing beyond, unless you have the warp or something that is extraordinary in the next 500 years. I think you know the condition for the human exploration in space is limited by the supply of water and food, the gravity and the bone, the bone density, etc. Those um, physical physical impact on the body. And the third is the radiation, and the that sort of thing are the major sources of the limits of the human exploration in space. So I don't see it's going to be like a Star Trek, or the Star Trek Enterprise is not going to happen. I don't think there'll be any sort of a Luke Skywalker, training in some unknown planet, or, I don't think that's not going to be the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. And well, but I think people may explore more on the moon and possibly Mars. So that's for my vision of 500 years.
And that's sounds like a really grounded and informed opinion. So,
well, I've been thinking about these kind of things. I'm in a position of advising the Japanese government, so there's a lot of thinking going on. What to do with space, what to do with the human space. Sending Japanese astronauts to Moon and the Mars, and we all try to see the possibilities, try to analyze the feasibilities, and so at the end of the day, we are pretty much this is an inside space community comments rather than space enthusiasts or space space dreamers. I am not the dreamer. I'm a political scientist, and I do I do work to give the analysis and the reasonable and the policy solution. So basically, that's how I see it.
I see we're right at time, and hopefully you have time for just one more question.
Sure. Yeah.
If it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
I would, but I am not a huge enthusiast of going to space. I'm happy if there's an opportunity, but I have so many things to do on Earth. So if I don't have a chance, that's okay. I mean, that's not the end of my life. But if there is the safe passage and easy easy way to travel, yeah, I can do that. But I'm not the kind of yes, I want to go. I can put all my money in to buy a ticket for Virgin Galactic, or I'm not that kind of guy.
But assuming it was safe and affordable, and the opportunity was available to you, how far would you consider going? Just to orbit, to the moon, or would you consider taking a multi-year trip to Mars and back?
It depends. I think it depends on how much it costs. I mean, if it's on the if it's on the same year, perhaps the cost of just going to the orbit and going to the moon and the Mars is much more expensive. So if there's a possibility, I would go for orbit. I mean, looking at Earth from space would be nice. I think, but a low Earth orbit is a little too close, so you can't see the entire globe. So it's better to take the sort of a cislunar trip to see the Earth from the distance and, see the Earth in a sort of a, behind the moon, and that would be nice. So Apollo 8 is the picture of Apollo 8 is one of the sort of the vision that I want to see.
And that reminds me of the Dear Moon project, which is planning to send 8 artists around the moon in 2023.
Yeah, Mr. Maizawa will be on. So I think it is the kind of trip that people dreamed of, and I think that will be the sort of a best offer for the safe. And of course, it's not affordable at this moment, but affordable to only for the billionaires. But I think if that becomes affordable, then I would love to take it.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being a part of my project.
Yeah, no problem. And it's been an interesting discussion. And if you have any further questions, please consult me.
I will do. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.